in the raw. Your friend, your brother, me, HAJJI, Dr. ROSHAN can. RK's Guyana Free Media. Greenidge, you know Carl Greenidge, master politician, former Minister of Finance on the Desmond Hoyt government, God bless his soul, Greenidge says, if Venezuela will eventually have to give up its spurious claims. So let us see what this gentleman is explaining, because when Greenidge speaks, ladies and gentlemen, on matters like these, we should listen. The man is brilliant, he has an extraordinary personality, and he knows his onions, so to say. And he is actually the government advisor on the Venezuelan claim issue to our country. This is the article, and I just want to show you the gentleman. As Guyana continues to remain vigilant and engage in international community, engage the international community on the ongoing border controversy with Venezuela, the Spanish-speaking nation will eventually have to give up its spurious claims to the Essequibo region and a portion of the country's exclusive economic zone. Well, we all know they've been claiming almost 2/3 of our country. And they believe that they are entitled to our exclusive economic zone. And they have chased away investors, ships, which were doing exploration. They have been threatening us by coming to our borders. Particularly Maduro was doing that, the president there, to whip up sentiments of his people so he can get an election, to be elected. Now back to the article. This was the view expressed by Carl Greenidge, the country's advisor on borders and a key agent in the border controversy case currently before the International Court of Justice. So as you know, this case has been ongoing. We are before the International Court of Justice. They said they can listen to the case. Maduro said they can't. Eventually Maduro agreed. And it is known that they will lose the case. This is why they didn't want to go to court. They wanted to have negotiation because they want to steal a piece of our land. During a recent appearance on social media program hosted by Globespan, Greenidge spoke of the likely outcomes as regard the border case before the World Court. So he, being au fait and administrating the interest of this government and the interest of Guyanese and Guyana before the World Court and studying the matter in detail, he has formulated some very powerful and serious and good for us viewpoint and advisories. He noted that with the international community watching, Venezuela will have to toe the line. The world is in Guyana. America is on our side. American companies are in Guyana. And with all of that, an international companies operating here, in international countries looking at Guyana, Venezuela has to be careful. For its part, Greenidge noted that Guyana has to remember where its interests lie and remain vigilant in safeguarding its sovereignty. So we must not catapult in giving them a piece of our territory in order to satisfy them or anything of that sort. We must be vigilant or awake and sharp to the going zone by Venezuela to steal our lands. Such as in relation to our land territory and maritime space and the purely fortuitous claims on maritime space where you happen to have petrocarbons discovered. That the world sees through this and the world is not prepared to sit and allow them to do this, Venezuela will eventually have to give up. So with the petrocarbons that the world need, remember some people were saying we should not go for petrocarbons and we should stay poor because it's going to affect the environment and such nonsense. But now the world needs more petrol than ever before. So we have a demand. They need our petrol or our petrocarbons that we have discovered. And the world will end up supporting us and backing us up. That he is saying Venezuela, eventually will have to give up, he added. According to the advisor on borders, that is Carl Greenidge, Guyana will have to continue its advocacy at an international level to retain support for its cause. So we must stay strong and we must stay close to the European Union, the United Nations, the world, the African, Caribbean and Pacific group. We have to stay close and strong, and with our friends in South America and in CARICOM, stay strong and have good relationship technically. This entails, he's saying, and back to him, this entails the country paying serious attention to strengthening its diplomatic service with the requisite people. Find people who have linguistic skills, who understand the economies and politics of our neighbors, who find out what are the problems of some of these countries, whose support we want. So we should find people who have more than one languages to represent our countries in these foreign lands. Maybe Brazil, he's talking about other South American countries, that we should have ambassadors, he is actually saying technically, with double language capabilities and to understand their needs. So that when you call on them to render that assistance, they can remember and say, well, you stood up in the UN and the ACP, African, Caribbean, Pacific group of states, for a principle in which we have an interest, Greenidge said. So if we stand up for them in the United Nations or somewhere in the world, the ACP, they will remember us, that we are a good country and that they will want to support us. He noted too that from a foreign policy perspective, it is important that Guyana make no enemies and also embrace principles that are consistent with the plight of countries whose support the country desires. So we must not make enemies, we must be friendly, and so on, especially whose support we will need. It was recently announced by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Guyana that Venezuela has filed an objection in a bid to delay the substantial hearing of the 1899 arbitral award case before the International Court of Justice after refusing to join the proceedings since 2018. So they asked for a delay. Maybe they asked for a delay so they could put a defense, or they would have lost the case. Guyana approached the World Court in 2018, seeking a final and binding judgment to reinforce that the 1899 arbitral award remains valid and binding on all parties, as well as legal affirmation that Guyana's Essequibo region, which contains much of the country's natural resources, belongs to Guyana and not Venezuela. The Spanish-speaking nation had initially refused to participate in the proceedings. Remember, ladies, I told you that, and gentlemen, I told you that. And had even challenged the court's jurisdiction to hear the matter. But in December 2020, the ICJ established that it has jurisdiction to hear the substantive case, something which Venezuela did not accept. Back in March of this year, Guyana had submitted its written arguments for its memorial to the ICJ, which was requested by the court following its December 18, 2020 decision that it had the jurisdiction to hear the case against Venezuela. So we had to produce our necessary arguments, as you do in any court. Guyana moved to the World Court After exhausting all means of negotiation with Venezuela and the failed good officers process between the two South American countries. We know about that. This was ongoing since Forbes Burnham time. United Nations General Secretary Antonio Guterres in January 2018 decided that the case should be settled by the ICJ after exercising the powers vested in him to decide how the controversy should be settled by the 1966 Geneva Agreement between Guyana, Venezuela, and the United Kingdom. So Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, has this authority to make a decision that it has to go through this process. The ICJ, what is the ICJ? The International Court of Justice is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. It was established by the United Nations Charter in June 1945 and began its activities in April 1946. The court is composed of 15 judges, elected for a 9-year term by the General Assembly and the Security Council of the United Nations. The seat of the court is at the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands. The Spanish-speaking nation is laying claim to more than 2/3, I told you that too, of Guyana's landmass in the Essequibo and a portion of its exclusive economic zone in which almost 11 billion barrels of oil have been discovered over the past 7 years. Guyana's President Irfaan Ali has been using his platform at international forums to inform the world about Venezuela's continued disregard for international norm in pushing its illegal claim to Guyana's territory. And this is amazing indeed that our president is using his brilliance as he's moving around the world, and the world is looking at him, and he's moving most presidential, and the world, even the richest countries want good terms with us. He's bringing the right message of Guyana as a peaceful country being bombarded by a vicious dictatorship next door that's supposed to be a good neighbor. Simultaneously, Guyana had recommended to maintain bilateral relations with Venezuela. The government committed to maintain good relations. In fact, over the past week, Venezuela's ambassador to Guyana, Carlos Amador Perez Silva, met with various cabinet ministers, including Prime Minister Brigadier Mark Phillips. So we're open. He decided he wanted to speak to us, realizing we're having international recognition. On Tuesday PM, Phillips and the Venezuelan diplomat discussed ways of enhancing bilateral relations between the neighboring countries. The Prime Minister indicated that Guyana is ready to improve relations within the construct of respect for Guyana's sovereignty. So if you want to have Venezuela a good relationship with Guyana, you respect our sovereignty. And the nonsense you were going on with by putting war tanks next door to us, flying helicopters into our territories, and including as nearby as Region 7 or Bartica, is unacceptable. Friend and family, your friend, your brother, me, HAJJI Dr. ROSHAN Khan, in the raw. Say thank you. A farewell, friends.